Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to the DM Roundtable for December 2019. This is a chance for patrons and I to get together and discuss topics in tabletop RPGs. And by sharing our ideas, thoughts, and experiences, we can all become better DMs and GMs. The DM Roundtable discussions are open to all patrons at every level of patreon.com/RogueWatson. You don't even have to be an active participant. You can jump in here and lurk to your heart's content, and we're glad to have you. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, and Rodney. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos de Vicente Gilberto, Sean, a.k.a. Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Sam, and Arash. Thank you all very much for your support. This month's topic, as determined by the poll on the Patreon page, is all about using private versus hidden roles. As DMs, do we put everything out on the table? Or sorry, I said private versus hidden. Private hidden roles versus publicly rolling. As DMs, do we put everything out on the table, or do we hide behind our DM screens? Do we fudge roles, and when is it okay to do so? Joining me for this month's DM Roundtable, we have Sean, a.k.a. Cert2B.
Hello.
Jordan.
Howdy.
And Marcos.
Hey, what's going on?
So, this is an interesting topic for me because I have really no experience using hidden roles. And I realize that's the traditional way that you would actually sit down and play a tabletop RPG, is you would sit behind a DM screen. Everybody else has their roles out. The players have their roles on the table. The DM sits behind the screen, and you roll things hidden, and then you tell the players if something hit, something missed, somebody made a save, and what's going on. So I'm very curious to know, as someone who has almost never played physical D&D, what you all's experiences are. Jordan, you were the first one here, I believe, so let's start with your experiences. First of all, do you prefer, and what is your experience with using hidden roles versus public roles?
My experience has kind of varied between the face-to-face, actually at a table, and the virtual. Because like you've experienced so far, Eric, with virtual tabletops, it's hard to hide them. But that's actually one of the reasons why I picked Fantasy Grounds over Roll20, because when they do combat and you're doing rolls, you can roll and it literally will only say hit or miss. That way they can't reverse calculate what my attack is, because it's not going to show that. Or I throw it in Fantasy Grounds, it has a dice tower, so it is hidden, similar to what I was doing when it was face to face. And the nice thing about doing that is if you're going to do like a stealth check of one of your creatures compared to the party, you can do that with a hidden roll, and they don't know why you're rolling, and it freaks your players the crap out because they see you picking up your dice.
Okay.
And with that response, it always strikes the fear of God into them a little bit. And then sometimes you can just do that for the heck of it, and you can just be like, "Oh no, I just wanted to roll my dice. I haven't rolled it in a while. You guys are taking too long in your planning discussion," and it gives them the clue of, if you don't do something, I could throw a random encounter at you or a random creature. So for me, those hidden rolls are good because it kind of helps them not reverse engineer what my monster stats are.
Okay.
Because that's always the hardest part of playing on a virtual tabletop, is they sit there and they go, "Okay, you rolled a total of 19. Your dice said 15, so it's a +4. Okay, we know what this is, and the only thing you're hiding is their AC and your HP."
And Roll20 even has it where you can hover over the final result, and it'll just tell you like exactly what the modifier was and all of that. So it's pretty easy to see based on their strength. Yeah.
So it just gets complicated with that, but that's kind of my general experience. I'm sure as we dive into the discussion, I can more, but for me, that's kind of what I've seen. So I would say, Marcus or Sean, what's kind of your experience doing face to face?
Yeah, let's go with Sean. I believe you were here second. What are your thoughts on using your initial thoughts on using hidden versus public roles, and which do you prefer?
Excuse me. Had a little bit of a coughing fit. So, anyways,
appreciate you being here while you're recovering from a malady.
My experience in terms of when to use hidden roles and when to use public roles does kind of vary on the group. The group that I have right now is really good at not metagaming. So I have really no problem whatsoever in having all of my roles out in front for them. As a matter of fact, a couple weeks ago, one of my players was going down a hallway where there was a pit trap in there, and I saw a previous perception roll. I thought he had seen it, but he had actually rolled a 2 on his perception roll, so he did not see it. So he went and activated the trap because he's like, my character didn't see it. So because of the group that I have now, I know that I can kind of trust them with not taking advantage of what they know versus what their characters know. Now, the group that I had prior to that, I did a lot more hidden roles with them because they were horrible at metagaming. So that's really a lot of the basis of when I choose to hide and when I choose to publicly do it. Because some of the things that I will sometimes still do is I have a macro that is essentially tied to the perception roll of each of the characters in their character sheet, but it does it with a /GM message. So it's completely hidden to them. So when they enter a room, I can hit that, see their perception, and then I will describe what they see.
You roll their perception?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I click the one macro and it'll roll everyone's perception, but it'll do it so that only I can see it. I haven't had to do that too much, like I said, with this group because they're very good at not metagaming. But that's something that I have used before in the past with Roll20 to still keep the rolls hidden and still determine what I tell them and what I don't tell them.
Now, do you primarily play on Roll20 or is it more of a split?
Primarily Roll20. There is a couple friends of mine that we do a physical game, but because of jobs and things like that, we play once every 4 weeks, if that. We don't get a chance to get together very often just because of scheduling conflicts. So
I know a lot of people would take 4 weeks for sure.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with the physical meetups, because with the virtual ones, like the group that I have now, I've got one player who's up in New York, one player who's in Chicago, one player lives in Texas, and one player lives in Tennessee. So,
wow, you're triangulating the country, I think.
So what you're saying is you meet up every 2 weeks, right?
Every week for the virtual one.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Unless certain things come about that would involve more than half the group being missing, or something like that. But I'm starting to put together a couple one shots. So if there's only 2 or 3 folks that can make it, we can still have a game session. Part of the reason I put the Gloomhaven together.
Now, Marcos, you still play a lot of physical, right? You do a lot of Adventure League stuff?
I have, but not recently. Recently, my job's been really demanding, and they're threatening to move me again. So I haven't been doing as much as Adventure League within the past few months. But in the past, um, I've done both. Mainly when it comes to physical games, I use the hidden roles, and that's just because when you think of D&D, you think of a guy behind the screen and people in
Or
front of the
girl.
screen. Yeah, guy or girl in front. Yeah, yeah. That's like the picture that you have in your head.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
synonymous with D&D.
Yep.
So a lot of people, when you play physically, they expect for you to have your cool dungeon master screen with a picture of a red dragon breathing fire on a on an elf or something. They kind of expect that, and you kind of throw people a loop when you come and it's like, no, I'm just one of you. I'm just going to roll dice in the open. Because with D&D with Dungeons and Dragons in person, that's just what people have come to expect. Defaultly is the screen. The person rolls behind the screen. They look up at you slowly, and they just grimace. It's that sense of unknowing that I think has a lot of the theater that comes along with physical D&D. But when I play on like Roll20, I do not roll secretly. Everything I do is in the open, because on virtual tabletops it's a lot more easy for the DM to almost be a fifth player or a sixth player, however many people that you have. It's easier for the DM to be an extra person, or at least seem like he's an extra person. He or she is an extra person playing, um, because because in that situation, it's everybody's looking at the dice. So everybody is learning about the dice at the same time, saying, "Oh, well, this is how the story is going to go." The DM might have a plan, saying, "I want for the goblins to drop a rock on on the fighter's head," but if the dice say no, the goblin misses the rock and falls instead. That's just how the story goes. The dice have told that story, and it's a lot easier for the players to get to be in on that story too, when they can see the dice active like that.
Why is that? Why is there such a? I agree with you. I think that when I picture the default for physical tabletop RPGs, it's the DM screen. But when I think of the default for virtual tabletops, everybody's rolling dice together. Why is that?
And you know why that is? Video games. When
Fucking
you think
video.
of physical, when you think of physical D&D, you think of a role-playing game. You think of like LARPing. You think of physical things that involve a person playing a character. But when you think of a virtual tabletop or playing Dungeons and Dragons online, you envision yourself playing a video game. And in a video game, there really isn't a dungeon master. The dungeon master is the program that you're playing with. That is the program that's rolling the random dice to see if the raid boss one shots you.
So,
You know,
do you feel like that influences the player's playstyle as well? Because it
it
leans
does.
more toward video
It,
game style
it
playstyle
it
on
does, and
virtual?
that's why people metagame so much, because they see the virtual tabletop as a video game. When you play Assassin's Creed 3 and you've played Assassin's Creed 2 and 1, you already have a knowledge of how to play those games. So you come in stronger than if somebody was just playing it for the first time with no previous experience. Even though technically the person in universe in that game has never done it before, the person controlling that person knows the situation. That's the reason why metagaming is so prevalent on virtual tabletops, online D&D, because it's synonymous in people's minds with actual video games.
I feel like there's like
Thank you for
three
the
different.
shout out.
I feel like there's like three different topics spinning off of this one that we could do entire
Oh,
DM roundtables on.
yeah. But no, because I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
I play as a player in a game, and the DM rolls secretly. And the other thing that I don't like, the reason why I personally don't like rolling in secret on virtual tabletops, is because of cheating. Um, yes, the DM probably doesn't do that. A majority probably don't fudge rolls, but anytime you cast doubt, anytime you cast doubt, there's always that chance of um of malice. There's always that chance of, what's the word? Not what's that word?
You're
Just
gaming it. You're
no, there's
you're
a word. It's escaping me. Ah, shoot. It's a word that when somebody doesn't trust you, like when they're like, I don't know, I don't believe that, and it builds up over time. Even it might just be the person's rolling bad and the DM's rolling good, but
Okay.
if that
Suspicion.
there.
it's
Yeah.
suspicion, yeah. There we go. There we go. You got it.
I'm a writer. It's
But
okay.
there we go. But yeah,
So let me
that's
let
Eric,
me
you
ask
win
this.
that prize.
Let me ask this, Marcus. Like, is that always a bad thing? Because for me as a GM, like when I fudge rolls, typically it's to do it in the player's favor, not so much to screw the players. So is it more on the
Mm.
GM to create that sense of
I
suspicion of
mean,
like, oh my gosh, you rolled another 20?
it's
Or
not a
where
bad thing, but I feel like the reason why we play Dungeons and Dragons is because of randomized dice rolls. If
right.
people don't like randomized dice rolls, go play Dungeon World. Go play,
Mhm.
go play something else. that doesn't have
Overwatch, Halo.
some other role-playing game
just
that
other
doesn't
RPG, yeah.
have dire consequences, because Dungeons and Dragons is a game that is inherent with combat and death. The story is told by how the dice is rolled. There's a reason why the rule of cool is not an actual rule in D&D. You can say that you do a triple gigantic backflip and flames and phoenixes and freaking choir music flies at you when you swing your sword. But if you roll a 3, you still miss. Nothing happens. The dice have said that you are going to miss. That is the story that the dice are saying. If you hide those rolls, there's a chance that the person was like, well, I did want to hit. I explained this super cool and I did hit, but you didn't want for me to hit because you want the monster to live. It just creates discourse.
But because you're
a possible source of discourse.
And you're saying
But
if you play with physical people, that becomes you just trust each other because you're in that space together.
Exactly. Physical D&D, it's a different mindset. It's almost like you're telling a story instead of playing a game.
Have you ever been in a situation where you were at a physical table and that came up where somebody was like, "That's not true. Let me see your dice, DM, GM."
Once or twice. And
really?
I'm like, okay, lift the screen, show them.
Oh, okay.
But really, I think I've told you a few times about the guy who just kind of leaned back after a while.
Yeah.
But that was mainly because of like cutscenes and stuff like that. It was like, well, I'm not controlling my character. You just play him. But that wasn't because of dice. But
yeah.
But sounds a little tilted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's because there's such a difference between physical play and on a virtual tabletop that it really depends on where you're playing at.
I didn't even think about that. Honestly, that's a great point. I didn't think that the difference between them would be the difference between virtual and physical, but that makes sense because to me, public roles is the default, but also to me, virtual tabletop is my go-to at this point. It would be fascinating that if I sat down with my friends to play a physical game, if I suddenly felt really naked and exposed by rolling everything out in the open versus being able to keep it on a screen. I know that when Chris did Storm King's Thunder, there were a couple times when he rolled physical dice for whatever reason he wanted to, and then it was fuck all if we knew if he was telling the truth or not. And it's interesting that he chose to do that because he created a precedent for rolling some hidden dice rolls. And the one time, maybe two times, where we actually ran into like a bug in Roll20 a couple of sessions ago, where it was not, for some reason, it was not displaying my rolls to my players, even though it was rolling in the system. And when I explained that to the players, like, oh, I rolled a hit or I got the save, my players were immediately calling bullshit on. Like, they didn't see the rolls and they turned on me so fast.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness, you guys are kind of pissed that you didn't. And what's funny is I actually have a great out, which is literally I stream our D&D show, so it's like I cannot tell a lie. Like it's out there. It is.
But imagine that with people that you don't know.
I know. I just got a taste of that, and I'm like, we've been friends for 20, 30 years.
And that's the reason why on virtual tabletops, if I'm doing a pickup group, everything's in the open, unless it's like a passive perception or like a stealth check or something where the metagaming knowledge wouldn't come in.
Right. So if you
something like that.
So if you're setting up like an ambush of a creature, and obviously you can't just like display in Roll20 like Displacer Beast rolls a stealth check, and everybody's like, oh, what's going on here?
Exactly.
And you're just like, well, fuck.
The way to kind of get around. The way to probably get around that is if you're having something sneak up and getting ready to ambush them, have them roll perception, then you roll your stealth. They'll kind of know something's coming, but you at least have an out for the surprise round.
See, I just use passive perception for all that, though. I think that's what it's there for.
Here. I always ask for scene initiators. If they go somewhere new, I say, what are you doing? And when I ask, what are you doing? Most people realize to say, okay, hold on. What are we doing? Are we just, whistling Dixie and walking down the road smelling roses,
Mhm.
or are we, stealthing? And based on that, I know how to roll my rolls.
Mm,
If they're stealthing, then I know that I can just roll perception out in the open for the guard instead of patrolling.
yeah.
Because they already know they're stealthing. The characters in that universe, in that world, know that they're being stealthy. They're being hypersensitive to whatever they're doing. They're going to be on the lookout for if guards notice them.
Now, when you
I'm
But
still
you know,
I'm still visualizing that whistling Dixie, but it's like a group of like bugbears and goblins on patrol. That's hilarious.
when you roll
you know,
those stealth ambushes, would you then later after the fact reveal your roll? Do you feel like you need to show it or say that you rolled this or something, or everybody just accepts like, okay, yeah, you ambushed us?
well, it depends on it really depends on what I rolled and how the narrative's going.
Mm,
If the rogue's stealthing and he pokes his head into the king's chamber, king has a passive perception of 12. He's not looking. You think he's safe. Um, but say that the king has and there's somebody else in the room with them, and that guard is actively looking for people. I'm going to roll in public that guard is looking, and if that matches the past perception, then then the rogue who's stealthing knows that they've been seen. Um, that's just flat out in the open as that is.
I think it
Um,
kind of depends on the precedent you set. So I think since you've
Mhm.
been doing it a specific way so far,
mhm.
I think that kind of guaranteed the reaction you got from your players when the system failed. I
Yeah.
think that if you had not set that precedent, that you'd be able to find sort of a nice common ground somewhere between Sean and what Marcus is saying. Um, I definitely lean more on the side of, hey, if we're going to be pretending that this is a role playing game, then I'm going to create as much of this as you discovering it as possible. But my play style as a GM isn't this unbiased God that's justice and mercy at the same time. Mine is, you guys are a group of heroes. I want to highlight you being heroes. I almost, I don't think I've ever TPK'd a party. I've had people die, but I'm never going to create a situation where it's a complete no-win situation unless I want to do that to make them run. So when it comes to hidden roles and roles out in the open, they know I'm not out to screw them because of the precedent and the play style that I'm putting forward.
Uh, Building off on that, when, if ever, would you specifically fudge rolls or fudge any kind of uh, information, I guess? Jordan, that's going to you.
Oh,
Or, sorry,
specifically?
yeah.
Okay. Usually it's around um I know like Marco said there's no rule of cool. But if someone comes up with a really, really, really good idea and it's a contested role, I will, depending on what it is and what they've described, I might have them, if they do fail, I might have them roll again. So it's like a partial failure. So it's not a complete failure. You came up with this awesome idea. I want to give you inspiration for it. And then you roll a two.
Hmm.
Sorry, buddy, that sucks. So what you don't want just want to completely crap on their idea because their idea was awesome. So you
Yeah.
make it a partial failure, just like how you have partial successes.
The easiest
So
way to, I think, is
yeah,
built into 5e, which is you give them advantage, right? If they describe something really cool in a neat way, or they just have a cool idea, then I will let them do that with advantage.
that's the slippery slope, though.
As everybody comes up with, I mean,
agreed.
you have to do more than just flavor it cool. I think like you can't just. I mean, I want people to be able to describe their stuff in cool ways, and occasionally I realize my players are describing things just to try to get inspiration out of me. I definitely catch them doing that all the time, and you can probably see my face when they're doing it. I'm just like, it's like okay, and they expect me to award inspiration or something, but I don't do that so much. But if they really do something that's outside the box, that's kind of zany, but also that I really enjoy, then I will definitely award them inspiration right then
Yeah.
and there, or advantage right then and there. Inspiration, I guess, is a separate thing. That's
Yeah,
like
if
you
they pull a
can bank
Cather, I
advantage.
agree. I agree with you. If they
The
pull a
other
Cather, I agree. But if they just like I swing my sword really hard,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
then we're all swinging our sword really hard. Really
The other
fancy.
way that I kind of fudge rolls is what you've done in the game so far, which is just work with the HP of my creature.
Right.
Because in those situations, I'm pretty good at mentally calculating, okay, are they going to survive? Are they going to die? What's going to happen? Because I'm sure all of us have played enough games where it's like, yeah, this is not going in your favor.
Mhm.
And depending on how that looks, if you can tell that they're in a situation where they can't run, then I'll figure out, okay, so maybe some of these guys are more minion-esque. And even though you were off by 5 hit points, this one's dead because it's not the big bad. And if it is the boss, then maybe I won't fudge as much
Mhm.
because that's the hurdle. The minions were the flavor text, but the big boss not so much.
Sean, what are
I
your
would
thoughts
agree
on
with that.
fudging rolls?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what he was just saying there. Now, I tend to not fudge my rolls very much. I kind of have a "you live by the dice, you die by the dice" kind of mentality. But I'm also kind of on the mindset of, especially if we're in a battle and they're fighting someone who isn't that important, and the battle's clearly over, I'll even sometimes just say, okay, you spend the next round just wailing on this last guy, and he drops like a ton of bricks, and
Yeah.
we're ready to move on.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where I've done it more often than not is I fudge hit points in the favor of the players just to wrap up a fight. You can tell in almost every fight when you have peaked, right? It's like, okay, at this point, the fight has become trivial almost. It's just a question of like, you guys got to be able to hit. Your party is clearly going to win this. Nobody's going to go down. It's almost
The question is how many more rounds?
right, exactly. And a lot of times it's like, what are these final like 2 rounds going to do? Probably not much. So I'll just let somebody like, okay, well, if they, especially if they have like less than 10 hit, or I guess it's a percentage. If it's like less than 10% or 15% hit points, I'll be like, all right, this is a killing blow. Now, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I hang on to it. In fact, I think that happened with the Clay Gladiators recently in our Tomb of Annihilation campaign, where somebody brought it down to like 1 or 2 hit points. And I was like, okay, because I'm about to get another round with this motherfucker. And they can do some damage. But most of the time, I will fudge things in the interest of time for the player's benefit. I don't know how often I've done the opposite of that. I know for a fact, I do kind of wish Chris was here for this. He has done it in the opposite way. He has let creatures hang on well past their expiration date, and essentially just give them not even hit points, but like a timer. It's like they're going to be alive for this many rounds, and it doesn't really matter what the players do, which is fascinating. I mean, it's kind of upsetting from a player standpoint because it's like, well, wait, what are we doing? But from a balance standpoint, that was his philosophy, and it wasn't for very many fights. It was very, very few fights. But if there was things that he wanted to be able to unleash with certain monsters or have boss fights be, um, memorable and dynamic, we couldn't let them. And that's part of the problem with D&D being such a dice-based game is because things can swing one way or the other so hardly, or so strongly. If the players just hit a bunch of crits and do all these things to your boss monster, on the one hand, you can let them live and die by the dice. On the other hand, maybe in theory, we're not fudging dice because we want to quote unquote win the game. That's not the point here. The point is we're fudging dice, hopefully, to create a more interesting story, or in most cases, a more interesting combat encounter by having those monsters last longer. Marcos, your thoughts on dice fudging specifically, or number fudging, I guess?
Never.
Never.
Heresy.
I just poured my heart on the table and you stomped all over it.
No, to be more specific, if I need to change the narrative, I don't change it by changing the dice. I change it by changing the story. I remember a couple years ago, I had a kind of like how you were saying, where Chris, he kept the monster around longer than it was needed, or longer than it was hit points had dictated. I had a lich near the end of a campaign, and I knew my people were like friggin' uber paladins. So I'm like, okay, how is this lich who's shaking in his pants right now when these guys are coming? What's he going to do? they're going to destroy him with all of their freaking inspiration and divine smites. So I ended up, instead of doing like a hit point system, I did like a soul, kind of like the soulmonger, but instead it's like a little bit smaller. The loot had like machines that were like just like smashing goblins, just like bonking them on the head, killing them, and then their soul was going to him. So when they enter the room, yeah, you can attack the lich, but he's regaining so much health every turn because of those contraptions that they had to kill the contraptions, and then that unlocks the hit points on the lich. That gives him more time to, do more evil undead stuff.
Do you now? You said unlock hit points. Do you literally give him like a buffer shield until they do that, or do you just
essentially? When I say unlock hit points, it's more.
You're giving him like temporary HP.
Well, no, he was regenerating so fast.
He was just
it didn't
healing.
Matter.
Okay.
He was regenerating so fast.
Were you still keeping track of the numbers though?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I was. Like, I mean, he had like 115 health.
Okay.
And they would get him pretty low, but like at the beginning of his round and on some of his legendary actions, he would regain health. So like, I describe it as, you slash the lich from shoulder to chest and he screeches. But the second your oiled blade leaves his decrepit body, you see the wound, close back together. By describing that, they know that, okay, maybe we need to do something else. As opposed to me saying, well, let me give him more hit points on the fly, or let me lower his hit points on the fly.
Okay. But you're every time he regenerates, you're like rolling all that information is out in the public. It's not just you're describing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like they would ask like, hey, why is he healing? And I'd say, well, you as a player see his health going up in rolls. Your character is seeing the shrieking, gibbering souls of angry goblins flying through the air, getting absorbed into this lich. You trace where the souls are coming from, and you see, in the left-hand corner of the room, there's a machine on like a treadmill, and that treadmill is just pulling goblins, bonking them on the head. Another goblin comes, bonks them on the head. Another goblin bonks them on the head. How are you going to fix this problem?
How are you going to solve the problem of Animaniacs corner?
I mean, I also did levity too because my goblins are like Muppets. They're not like goblins. My goblins are like just dirty Muppets. So
just dirty Muppets.
Yeah. But that's usually how. Instead of fudging the rolls, I change the narrative. If it looks like the people are going to TPK because this guy's really strong. Instead of doing lethal damage, they do non-lethal damage, take them prisoner, and we figure out what to do from there. There's always a narrative change that I do as opposed to a dice roll change.
Yeah, I've had a creature that I had introduced to my characters just 2 weeks ago. Very similar kind of circumstances, because they're level 11 at this point. And they're in this old castle where, again, there's a lich that's there. And they open up this one door to this room, and it looks like it's a creature protecting something. And there's a single CR 1/2 zombie standing there. That's it. Immediately, my players are suspicious for good reason.
Trap. It's a trap.
What I had introduced to them earlier in this castle is they found a machine that they realized essentially when this guy was still alive or as part of the process before he became a lich or after he became a lich, they're not sure exactly what. They would actually take innocent people, hook them up to this machine, literally suck out their soul and put it into these gems called soul gems that would be used to power different machinations within the castle. So essentially all the evil things that are in this castle are being powered by innocent souls that were trapped and killed here. And this particular zombie, after they slashed it once or twice, they saw a large soul gem in its chest, larger than they've ever seen with what they found so far. And as soon as the gem was exposed, the zombie's body started to close up, and the zombie started getting a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger, and then a little bit bigger. And so it's like, this is not a CR 1/2 zombie. And it actually became a very interesting fight. And essentially what it was is every time they would kill the zombie, it would essentially transform to a stronger form and a stronger form, a stronger form, until they got it to its final form where they killed it. And it just became a little bit of an interesting encounter. But I was also using that to set up a couple other creatures that had very similar properties. So it's a very safe encounter to set up a situation story-driven wise for a later encounter.
So how does that work with hidden and public roles?
That really wouldn't.
Great story. I loved it. I'm sitting here
But yeah,
it's like a joke. Going, where's the punchline?
Yeah,
Well, I
that's
guess,
a good point. It was just something that I just thought of. So
No, it's cool.
Never mind.
Well, I guess,
I'm about to use that. I'm about to use that. That was great.
because maybe
Well, it's
maybe
the
you
spinoff of
would
the
hide
meta
it.
knowledge thing, right? This is the
Yeah, because you would hide the
In a
roles
sense,
on
yeah.
that one, so that way when the people don't know, like they have to figure out that it's evolving every time you kill it.
right.
You know, like if you roll the hit points every time, I don't know if you had it preset or something, but no, like I can see how that could be that. Like you would either roll it in public saying like, oh, it's changing, what are you going to do? Or don't roll in public and have the players figure it out.
So out of curiosity, how did they actually beat it?
One of the players basically said, "We need to destroy the soul gem," and I was like, "I didn't think about that. That's a good idea." Okay. And I immediately changed what they had to do in regards to that. So essentially, like 2 of them would do enough damage to expose it, and then one person just had like a readied action just to, who was the Warforged Barbarian, who can do a ton of damage with his multi-attack, especially while raging. So he waited for the fighter and the Bard, who is a Valor Bard, so he's a combat Bard, to do enough damage to essentially try and expose the gem. And then the Barbarian just went hog wild at the gem, and I was like, okay. The gem now has this much hit points, I guess. So, okay. And then eventually they did enough damage to it that it's like, okay, the gem got destroyed, and then the zombie just dissolves into a pile of bone, muscle, and pus.
How much does meta knowledge affect how much we want to show or hide from our roles, do we think?
I think that depends on the players. That really depends on how it seems, how well or how little they're acting in accordance to what they know versus what their characters know. That's been my experience anyways.
I'd say it's yes, absolutely yes. I'm very political, so I just need to put down a definitive. I completely agree with Marcus. But also, I think it depends on the experience level of the players. Because sometimes
That's
my
true.
table will be mixed, and there'll be people that'll go, "Oh, goblins," and the only exposure they have to goblins is Lord of the Rings or Goblin Hunter anime, whatever. But they don't know how many hit points it is. They don't know tactics, what have you. And when that meta knowledge hits to a player where it's like, "Oh, I've faced ones. I know what they do. Yada yada yada." What I'll do is I'll actually go into 4th edition and pull different tactics or things that they're able to do. Or I'll take different classes and pull skills from that and apply it to my monsters to give them something that they didn't expect the first time. Or I'll change the tactics depending on the setting, so the environment will make a bigger difference. Like one time I had them face goblins, and it was like target practice. They seriously just stood there and shot all of them, and they were dead within 2 rounds. And the next time they went into a room and there was tables, and the goblins heard them coming in, flipped the tables, and suddenly everybody has full and 3/4 cover. So it completely changed the scenario based off of the environment.
When it comes to using public roles, especially for if we're using virtual tabletops, which is usually where public rolling comes into play, have you seen your players, and this is to build off the meta knowledge one, literally change tactics or revise their plans because they've seen your roles? So they, in other words, maybe a creature they haven't encountered, they see the rolls and all of a sudden they see in like a +8, +9, and they're thinking, oh, never mind. We need to either start pulling out more of our once per day stuff or change our tactics in some way because of literally just seeing those rolls.
Well, that's how I usually spin the narrative.
Yeah.
Like, if they see the frost giant swing swing a sword and it's a +8, like I said, the player sees a +8 and they're going, "Oh man, we're in trouble." But I describe that, to as in the universe as, your paladin, deflects this blade, but there's so much power and strength behind it that you're just barely able to glance it to the left. When the blade hits the ground, it shatters the cement that was, dwarven made in the highest peaks of the dwarven mountains. That's some strong stuff. I put it in the narrative saying that, like, you see a +8, your character sees a scary, frost giant that's about to cut you in half. Um, I usually try to work with the inherent meta knowledge that just comes with public roles, because whether you like it or not, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you can you can work with it and describe it in universe in a certain way to try to clarify. Um, but then there are some things that are just meta knowledge, um, that it's kind of hard to not say as many knowledge, like the trolls with fire or acid. Like, pretty much everybody knows that. And there's usually a way in narrative, uh, to explain that away as well.
Like, it's interesting how much characters in unit, because players obviously will know more and more as they play more, but how much would the average hero know about the average monsters? And that's how we actually have house rules for your characters to gain meta knowledge, basically, in universe, and that works a little bit. I feel like we've played around with it in terms of everybody's asking, like, I don't know, like, how dangerous do I think this creature is? Like, well, roll a nature check or roll a religion check or an arcana check or something to see how much your character would really know. And I feel like that ends up working out okay, at least for that initial, like, we're seeing this enemy, but we haven't seen it like in action yet. And players want that information. And I appreciate when we try to do that in universe rather than somebody getting on Google and saying, okay, is a clay gladiator immune to psychic damage or kind of a thing, not to call a certain player out, but that does happen. And I think all of us who have been players have probably been guilty of using meta knowledge before. You can't even, it's really impossible to divorce yourself from it. But I'm trying to swing it back to the hidden in public roles thing, because that is, it kind of goes hand in hand in terms of using, because that's how you gain a lot of meta knowledge too, is you see these public roles from the enemies, and you're just gaining this information like, okay, well, I know this thing has this many attacks and has this kind of modifier, and you can also learn its saving throws same way. If you cast a some kind of stun type hypnotic pattern or something, you can see like, oh, it's got a +8 on its wisdom saving throw, so I'm probably not going to try to cast more wisdom based spells, even though it's still dice, so it could still happen, but you gain that knowledge of, like, and you do try to spin it, at least I have, and what you're talking about, Marcos, you build that into the narrative. So it's like, oh yeah, this creature looks like it's, I don't know how you describe wise. It just looks like it's learned in the world.
Usually if it's wisdom, like, it's like a feeling.
Okay.
There's like a different, sensory description for each saving throw.
Okay.
Strength is the person flexes and you see bulging muscles.
Yeah.
Constitution is, they're hardy, their skin is tough. Dexterity is, they're limber. Intelligence is usually like
eyes
skull.
glancing
Look at the
about.
eyes.
Like
Yeah. The
scholar,
eyes
like,
look intelligent. Yeah.
Yeah, or like, they have like an aura of something around them that let you know that this person's smart. Wisdom is usually like the way they move. They don't expend like if you do, like, what's a wisdom save? Like a whole person.
Yeah.
As opposed to, just saying, oh well, the person saves.
Wisdom be like an awareness, because like
And
perception is all wisdom. So
the person who notices that the person saved on, they see that the thing has a +8 and it saved against its, vicious mockery or something.
yeah.
I would describe that as, the thing saves against your wisdom save. You see that as, it closes its eyes and focuses. It puts its fingers in his ears and go la 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 la, so it can't hear you. Something like that is specifically for wisdom to let you know in universe that this thing is immune or it has a really strong resistance based on what the player saw. If the players didn't see that roll, I would just be like, it doesn't affect it. Well, why doesn't it affect it? That's a really good question. Your players, you have to figure that out.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of lean into what Sean was saying at the beginning part, trust, because I'm going to be kind of a devil's advocate on this particular side of this topic. Because again, for me, I don't show everything, but it's because I've built trust with my players. Where Sean was talking about, I know they're not going to meta game the situation. They know that I'm not trying to screw them. So for me, since I don't show everything, like in this particular topic, I almost have to be a lurker in this conversation because it doesn't affect me because I'm not showing everything because they can't reverse it.
Okay. Is like your monster saves an example of something that you would like to keep hidden?
Yeah, because otherwise, then it becomes more AC situation where they're trying to figure out what the armor class is. Well, if they try it a couple of times to figure it out, if they can just look at the math and go automatically, oh crap, they have a +4 or a +5, that's never going to happen. Then it just kind of, like you said, they immediately, without rationalizing it, without having me have to story tell, rationalize why they know to change tactics, I don't have to do any of that reverse engineering on their reverse engineering. I can just play it like I used to play it when I was doing it face to face.
If I had my druthers, which I don't want to change things in the middle of a campaign, I think I like the idea of keeping some things hidden. And I've talked about this before, and a lot of times in Crafting Annihilation and streams, the only thing that I fudge, the only number that I have, because I don't change dice, as we've talked about, because it's VTT and it just kind of how it goes with public roles, is the hit points. But I would probably like to keep saves hidden for all the reasons that's been discussed here. I think it's not being able to throw that certain specific number out there and being able to, instead of giving them the number of the modifier, just saying like what Marcos was saying and describe it narratively, like you don't know why this particular creature has this sense of presence and this, it stares you down and shakes off the effects. And then the player has to decide, like, oh, does that mean was that just a good roll or was it a good modifier? And that's the kind of information that I would like the players to guess with, rather than completely reverse engineering and saying, oh, well, he only had a +1, so it's just a good roll, so let's keep trying that. Or the opposite of, they've got a +8 or 9. Maybe we shouldn't try and use this particular save. I feel like I definitely can't change that now. And as I mentioned, during a brief window when Roll20 was offering some kind of bug where the players weren't seeing my rolls despite me actually putting them in Roll20, they were just immediately calling bullshit on like everything I rolled. So that covenant is absolutely destroyed if I stop rolling publicly. I feel like I could make that proclamation at the beginning of a campaign and say, hey, same thing with public roles, but I'm going to keep saves hidden. I feel like if we had that discussion at the beginning, that would be fine. I mean, they might not be fine with it, but we would roll with it, pun intended, if I made that ruling at the front. But I don't think I can change that now. I don't think I can, because it's like a fundamental. It's not even a house rule. That's like how we play the game. Like that would be a really stark thing to change this late in the campaign.
Yeah, you just can't. Once you start down that road, if you change it, they automatically start thinking. They, being the players, would think, "Why did you switch? You only would want to switch if you don't want for us to see," which means you might want to lie about roles and stuff.
Yeah,
that's me. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to verisimilitude, man. That's what it just comes down to.
Yeah, and like I said, the only reason I would only probably do it on saves, and just because it would be nice to have that modifier information held, just so the players don't immediately make assumptions, and instead we play it more in universe. Because AC is technically hidden, but because you attack all the time, you can't help but metagame AC.
But it takes rounds.
It takes
It's not
rounds.
like
It
it's not like
does.
resistance where you did the fire damage, and by the way, it only did half as much, and they have
Yeah.
to say, it's hardier than it looks, and everybody goes, resistance, click.
Right. Yeah.
With the modifiers where it goes, he saved. Okay, well, how much did he save by? Well, I don't know. Let me hover over this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're not throwing spells at it all the time, so you really have to make those tough choices. And maybe that's saying that would be too much of a nerf on spellcasters. Would be the argument that players would use. Be like, well, what the hell? I need that information. That's so. Yeah, it would be an interesting thing to think about for next. That's from what I can think of. I don't mind having all my roles be public, as it's been discussed. I think that's more how we all expect it to be in a virtual tabletop. That would be the only thing that I would maybe like to keep hidden, would be specifically saves for monsters.
Yeah, another system that, because whenever my group is finished with the campaign that we're currently on, we're going to try out Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Yes.
And one of the things that is interesting about that one is fighting a creature that is of a higher level is a lot more difficult, because you add your proficiency modifier and your level to your proficiency rolls. So if that's something that if you're fighting if the character is going up against someone.
Oh, do monsters get that too?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
And so if they're going up against a creature that's of a much, much higher level that they're not supposed to be ready for yet, you almost have to keep that hidden, because, at like tier 1, your saves are going to be +4, +5, +6. At tier 3, you're looking at like +14, +18.
Ooh.
And so if you see something with a +18 save, it's like, okay, we're going to run now.
Okay.
GTFO!
That's an interesting point. So it modifies the numbers even further and gives so much information.
But your players, as they approach, their attack rolls also can become very, very high as well, because, your attack roll modifier also increases just like the saves, and the ACs increase by the same rate.
Interesting. So
if you're facing an enemy that is 5 levels higher than you, expect their regular attack rolls to have a +5, and their AC to have a +5, and their DCs to have a +5. Mm-hmm. So and it's one of the reasons I think they also did that is even though you have the action economy in your favor, if you're facing a boss enemy and it's like a 5-on-1 or a 4-on-1 situation, even though you have action economy in your favor, that creature is going to have a lot more advantages because it's going to be a lot stronger.
Is relevant to what we just talked about for Crafting Annihilation in terms of the boss fights and how they scale. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts for and funny about this, and a lot of our topics overlap with other topics. This one especially, unbeknownst to me, ended up overlapping with a lot of other different topics we could discuss. I think meta gaming is probably an entire topic we could talk about, and VTT versus physical is probably an entire topic. But specifically, just on hidden versus public roles. Final thoughts, Jordan. Lay them on me.
I think they have a place and a time. And as long as you have a good balance and you set the precedent for what you're going to do at the table, they're perfectly fine. But again, you have to, as a GM or a DM, look at it from the perspective of, this is a game that showcases my players' abilities, and I'm not using it to screw them. And as long as that's kind of, you're making them heroes, then it's okay to do it to lengthen out a cool battle, to my players fell off a rope bridge because they sucked at their dexterity save, and it just so happened they were fighting goblins on giant bats, and they landed on the back of a bat and killed the goblin because it was a partial failure. So depending on situations, creativity allows them, but you just have to do it in such a way where, again, you're making them look cool. They're having fun. As long as your players have fun, I'd say it's okay to do it, but you have to set the precedent.
Mm-hmm. Sean, final thoughts on hidden versus public roles?
Well, like you said, there's a lot of crossover with this, and really, this is going to vary from group to group as much as it's going to vary from GM to GM. It's, we've also talked a lot about trust and suspicion as well, although I think it is fair to have a little bit of distrust from players to GM because the GM is trying to run the game with some form of organization and storytelling and things like that. So really, it's just going to vary from group to group, and sometimes it'll even vary from campaign to campaign, and even game system to game system, depending on what you're running.
Marcos, final thoughts: hidden versus public roles.
Heresy.
This might be one of the ones that we've most disagreed on between, not like vehemently, but just have very differing opinions.
Which is good.
I think so, yeah.
This is a really, really big subject, and it really comes down to how you're playing.
Yeah.
There's so many different avenues for, at least for me, when it comes down to it. When it comes to a sit down at the table game of Dungeons and Dragons, it's old fashioned. I wear a hood. Turn down the lights. Pop some popcorn. And roll my rolls, but behind the screen, everybody has fun. But when it comes to virtual tabletop, though, it's almost like I'm a part of the game as well. We're all learning about how the story is going to unfold, based on however the rules are. And with the rules being in public, we're all learning at the same time. So yeah, for me, it just depends on where I'm playing.
Yeah, I think that's been the most interesting perspective for me to learn about as someone that 90% of their D&D experience or tabletop RPG experience is virtual. Having it be public roles has been just how I've always done it, or most of how I've done it. I definitely can see the perspective of the physical game and having the hidden roles. That feels it's like the correct way to do it. And then VTT, it feels like it's the correct way to do public roles. I would, as I mentioned, it would be nice to be able to just hide some of them, not because I want to ever actually fudge the number. I mean, I would be tempted to do that once or twice on like a big, although big bosses have legendary, that stupid bullshit ability. It's like you could just choose to succeed. So you probably wouldn't even need to fudge it, just basically hide it so it doesn't display. Maybe that's what I need. I need Roll20 to just tell me, you know what? I need it to just click the button and it can publicly say success or fail, but not display the numbers. That I think would be the ideal compromise. Yeah. Just for save. That's the only thing I can think of is save, just because it displays the modifier and all that. I would love it if it kept me honest in terms of, let me display if it's a success or a fail, and everybody can see that, but you don't get to see by what degree I succeeded or failed and what all the numbers were. So I think that would be a really interesting. I'd like to see that feature.
I agree. That actually would be pretty cool. You as a GM get to see the numbers, but they would just see you succeed or you failed.
Yeah, I would like that. All right. I think that will do it for this month's DM Roundtable. Thank you so much for Sean, Jordan, and Marcos for joining me. I am Eric. I hope to see you all again for next month's DM Roundtable discussion, which will be next year. Happy New Year, everybody. We're at the end. I know. It can't.
Merry Christmas, all.
Yes. Happy holidays to everyone. Play lots of games.
Count on it.